She never thought a simple act of kindness would change her life forever. One evening, a woman opened her door to strangers, outsiders who carried the weight of being judged everywhere they went. By morning, the quiet street was filled with the deafening roar of engines. Over 100 bikes standing guard outside her home. Why did they come? And what did her choice reveal about the way society treats those it fears? This is a story of trust, prejudice, and unexpected unity. Subscribe for Join Our Community. Mary was an ordinary woman living on the edge of a quiet town. She worked long shifts at a local diner, her days filled with pouring coffee, remembering regulars' names, and slipping extra pie slices to kids who couldn't afford them. Life wasn't easy, but she believed in kindness, the kind that didn't need to be loud to matter. Her neighbors knew her as someone who never turned away a person in need. If someone's car broke down, she'd offer jumper cables. If a stranger knocked on her door, she'd listen before judging. To Mary, compassion wasn't an act. It was a way of life. But in a world where appearances often defined worth, that same kindness put her at a crossroads. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she noticed a group of rough-looking men stranded near her street. Their leather jackets, tattoos, and roaring bikes made most people cross the road in fear. These were men society had already labeled as troublemakers, outsiders with no welcome. Mary didn't know their names. She didn't know their stories. All she saw were people who looked exhausted, hungry, and in need of shelter from the cold night air. While others would have locked their doors, she paused, torn between safety and the instinct to help. She couldn't have known that this one decision would echo louder than anything she had ever done in her life. That night, Mary did what most in her neighborhood would never dare. She let the bikers inside, offering them blankets, warm food, and a place to rest. They were polite, surprisingly quiet, and grateful. Yet behind her kindness, a storm was brewing, not inside her home, but outside in the watchful eyes of those who saw. By morning, whispers had spread. A neighbor spotted the leather jackets and roaring bikes parked near her driveway and quickly made a call. Rumors traveled faster than truth. Mary was harboring criminals. Mary had put the whole neighborhood at risk. No one asked her why. No one cared to know the faces behind the fear. Within hours, Mary became the target of suspicion. At the grocery store, familiar smiles turned into cold stares. Parents pulled their children away when she walked past. It didn't matter that she had lived in that community for years, serving coffee and kindness. It only mattered that she had opened her door to them. The men she sheltered knew this judgment well. They carried it everywhere, painted on their skin like invisible scars. They were judged not for who they were, but for how they looked. For Mary, it was the first time she felt the sharp sting of that same prejudice. Fear grew heavier. Whispers turned into phone calls. Soon, police cruisers began circling her block. One officer knocked on her door not with kindness but with suspicion in his tone. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his eyes darting past her into the house. The implication was clear. Kindness had no place here, only fear did. Mary's heart pounded. She realized that by opening her door, she had stepped into a world she had only watched from afar. The world of being judged unfairly, of having your humanity questioned because of appearances, but what she didn't know was that this story was far from over, because while her neighbors turned away, the men she had sheltered were about to show her a kind of loyalty the world never expected. By the next morning, Mary's house was no longer just a home. It was a target. Police cars idled nearby. Neighbors stood at their windows whispering behind curtains. To them, the sight of leather jackets and rumbling bikes was proof enough that danger had moved in. Mary tried to step outside, but the stairs cut into her like knives. A woman she had once helped at the diner turned her back. Another neighbor muttered just loud enough, "She brought this on herself." The men she had sheltered stood awkwardly on her porch, their presence both her protection and her curse. They knew this script too well, being branded as criminals without a trial, feared without being known. Now Mary was living that same reality, and it was suffocating. The tension reached its breaking point when a patrol car pulled up and two officers approached. One placed his hand on his holster as he asked, "Are you safe, ma'am? Do you need us to remove them?" The question wasn't about her safety, it was about appearances. To them, kindness looked like danger. Mary's voice shook as she replied, "They're my guests. They've done nothing wrong." But her words were swallowed by disbelief. The officer's glance at the men said more than any words could. "People like you don't belong here." For the first time, Mary felt the weight of prejudice not as a distant observer, but as its direct target. Her heart raced, caught between fear and defiance. Would standing by them cost her everything? Her safety, her reputation, even her place in the community? And just when it seemed the pressure would break her, the roar of engines echoed down the street. Dozens more bikes appeared, filling the road, one after another, until over 100 riders stood outside her home. As the engines rumbled and the street filled with over 100 riders, silence fell over the neighborhood. The very people Mary's community feared were now standing in unity, not to threaten, but to protect the woman who had shown them kindness when no one else would. Neighbors who had whispered behind curtains now watched in stunned disbelief. The judgment in their eyes was replaced by something else, confusion, maybe even shame. For once, they were forced to confront the truth. The people they feared weren't the danger. Their own prejudice was. Mary's house was no longer a symbol of suspicion. It had become a symbol of courage. The men left peacefully the next day, but their presence left a mark that could not be erased. For Mary, the experience changed everything. She finally understood, in a way she never had before, what it meant to live under constant suspicion, what it felt like to be judged not by your actions, but by your appearance. That realization was her burden, but also her gift, because from then on, Mary carried their story with her, reminding others that kindness should never come with conditions. And maybe that's the part we all need to sit with. How many times do we turn away from someone just because they look different? How often do we lock our doors, not against danger, but against the unknown? Mary's choice showed that compassion can cut through fear, even when the world doesn't understand it. The question is, when the moment comes for us, will we have the courage to do the same? If this story touched you, don't just watch. Be part of the change. Hit subscribe and join our community of voices that matter.